What would you say to the theory that the reason Bigfoot is rarely seen in public is because he's a vegetarian, maybe even a vegan? Actually, if he were vegan, not only would we see him more often, it would be in every third sentence, he said. But digs at my vegan cousin Larry aside, you'd be surprised how many people genuinely believe that Bigfoot, the elusive creature of lore, is a strict vegetarian. Yep, you heard right. Our furry friend from the forest is supposedly a fan of all things green and leafy. Welcome to Conspiracy Theory Debunked. No tin hats required. Now picture this: Bigfoot, giant of the woods, stomping around the underbrush, delicately picking berries and avoiding the succulent squirrels scurrying around his feet. Instead of lying in wait to pounce and feast upon some unsuspecting wild boar, the notoriously private skunk ape prefers to dine out on truffles and wild fennel. Before we jump back into Bigfoot's diet and maybe his yoga regime, give this video a like. And tell us in the comments what salad dressing you think Bigfoot would like. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe, or the squirrels from the last video will come and get you. Don't believe me? Check out our video and see. Anyway, back to Big Boy. Maybe we don't see him much because he's just too shy to be seen munching on his spinach salad. Because one of the most, and I use this next phase very loosely, compelling piece of evidence to support this theory is when proponents point to his footprints. Ah, the footprints. You see, according to our Bigfoot diet enthusiasts, his footprints are so deep because he's around a giant sack of vegetables on his back. And if that doesn't convince you, I don't know what will. I do like this theory because it does raise some rather interesting questions. If Bigfoot is a herbivore, does he have a vegetable garden somewhere in the woods? Does he go foraging for mushrooms? Does he compost? The possibilities are endless, and quite frankly, hilarious. So the next time you're out and about in the wilderness, keep an eye out for any unusual signs. A patch of eaten leaves, a hollowed out pumpkin, a trail of carrot peels. You never know, it might just be the evidence you need to prove that Bigfoot really just looking for a good tofu hookup. But of course, Bigfoot salad days come to an end when we introduce some evidence. Let's consider the obvious. The sheer lack of vegetables in the places Bigfoot is supposedly sighted. The Pacific Northwest, for instance. It's all towering trees and dense underbrush, hardly a haven for rows of lettuce or fields of broccoli. It's a bit difficult to imagine our furry friend rooting around for radishes in the rainforest, isn't it? And let's not forget about those alleged Bigfoot sightings in the snowy mountains. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall carrots and peas thriving in sub-zero temperatures. Maybe Bigfoot's been making snow peas out of actual snow, eh? Then there's the matter of Bigfoot's teeth, or rather, the teeth we've seen in artists' renditions based on eyewitness accounts. They're decidedly carnivorous, aren't they? Not exactly the flat grinders you'd expect of a creature dedicated to a diet of greens. And what about the infamous Bigfoot footprints? They're always described as large and deep, suggesting a creature of significant weight. Now, I don't know about you, but it's hard to pack on the pounds with a diet of just greens. Unless Bigfoot's been binging on avocados and nuts, but even then it's a stretch. Then, there's the sheer logistical nightmare of it all. Imagine Bigfoot loping through the forest, trying to gather enough greens to sustain his massive physique. It's a full-time job with overtime, and no time for hide and seek with eager Bigfoot hunters. So, unless Bigfoot has a secret garden of genetically modified super veggies, or a hidden stash of kale chips, it's hard to imagine he's sticking to a strictly vegetarian diet. The evidence, it seems, leans heavily towards a diet that's anything but green. So, unless Bigfoot has a secret stash of kale chips, I think we can safely say the greens are off the menu. Oh, and if any of you Bigfoot spotters happen to catch a glimpse of Chris Williams, get him to reach out. His friends miss him. Now, if Bigfoot isn't munching on spinach, what's he really eating? Let's dive into the more plausible theories about Bigfoot's diet, shall we? Starting with the idea that Bigfoot, if he exists, is an omnivore. That's right, the big guy might be just as likely to enjoy a juicy steak as he is to snack on a handful of wild berries. This theory makes a lot of sense when you consider the diverse diets of other large mammals. Bears, for instance, have a diet that includes both plants and meat. And let's not forget that humans too are omnivores. So it's not a leap to suggest that Bigfoot could be one as well. But let's take a moment to picture Bigfoot as a dedicated carnivore. Imagine him prowling the forest hunting for his next meal. Perhaps he's a fan of venison, or maybe he prefers a nice salmon fillet. Of course, this would mean that Bigfoot is an incredibly stealthy and skilled hunter, able to catch his prey without leaving a trace. That, or he's got an incredible talent for scavenging. On the other hand, could Bigfoot be a herbivore? It's a possibility. He could be out there, peacefully grazing on leaves and plants, much like a deer. But considering his size, he'd need to consume a massive amount of vegetation to sustain his energy levels. So, if you ever come across an oddly defoliated tree in the wilderness, it might just be Bigfoot's doing. Or, it could be a very hungry caterpillar. Or perhaps Bigfoot is an insectivore, feasting on the rich protein source that insects provide. Imagine him plucking grubs from rotting logs or catching flies mid-air. It's a picture, isn't it? To sum it up, if Bigfoot is out there somewhere, his diet could be as varied and complex as ours. And while we can't confirm his culinary preferences, it's fun to speculate. So Bigfoot is probably not a vegetarian, but he might still enjoy a good berry smoothie from time to time. But if Bigfoot isn't hiding from the shame of eating kale, why does he avoid the paparazzi? Well, one theory is that he's just a big fan of solitude. Picture this. You're a 7-foot-tall, hair-covered creature living in the deep forests of North America. You've got an excellent collection of pine cones, you've just found the perfect scratching post for your hairy back, and life is pretty good. But every time you go out for a stroll, there's a horde of camera-wielding enthusiasts trying to catch you in an unflattering pose. It's enough to make anyone a bit camera-shy, isn't it? Or perhaps Bigfoot is just a big introvert. You know the type. Loves long walks in the woods, avoids crowded places, and prefers the company of trees to people. And let's face it, who wouldn't prefer a quiet afternoon with a good book or a juicy pine cone over being chased around by zealous paparazzi? And let's not forget about Bigfoot's natural habitat. He's not exactly living in downtown Los Angeles, is he? No, he's out there in the wild, where the Wi-Fi is patchy at best, and there's not a Starbucks in sight. It's hardly the ideal spot for a paparazzi stakeout. Plus, have you ever tried to lug a professional camera and a long lens through a dense forest? It's not exactly a walk in the park. And finally, perhaps Bigfoot is just a savvy media manipulator, carefully managing his public image. He knows that scarcity creates demand, and by staying out of the spotlight, he keeps us all intrigued. Every blurry photo, every grainy video just adds to the mystery. And let's be honest, who doesn't love a good mystery? So maybe Bigfoot isn't a camera-shy salad muncher after all. He's just a regular guy who values his privacy. Let's take a moment to digest what we've learned about Bigfoot's diet. And no, I don't mean literally digest, unless you've been snacking on tree bark and wild berries, in which case, my condolences. So, we started with the theory that Bigfoot is a fan of greens. A real salad enthusiast, if you will. According to some eyewitnesses, he's been spotted munching on foliage like a giant hairy mountain goat. Yes, that's right. Apparently Bigfoot has a palate similar to a vegetarian, a massive 8-foot-tall vegetarian that leaves footprints the size of a small pizza. But then we took a step back and said, hold on a minute, let's put on our thinking caps. We looked at the evidence. We analysed the alleged Bigfoot droppings, and we noticed a distinct lack of leafy greens. Instead, we found traces of meat. You see, the conspiracy theory that Bigfoot is a vegetarian was debunked by, of all things, his own poop. Who would have thought that Bigfoot's bathroom habits would be his downfall? But we didn't stop there. We dug deeper and discovered that Bigfoot has been accused of stealing livestock. Chickens, pigs, cows, you name it. If it clucks, oinks or moos, Bigfoot has allegedly had it for dinner. So we've gone from a giant vegetarian to a carnivorous thief. It's quite the plot twist, isn't it? It's like finding out that your mild-mannered neighbor is actually a notorious bank robber. Now, we also touched upon why Bigfoot avoids the paparazzi. Is it because he's camera shy? Or is it because he's self-conscious about his diet? Perhaps he's worried about being body-shamed for his meat-eating ways. After all, the internet can be a cruel place. So, the next time you're in the forest, don't bother packing a veggie platter for Bigfoot. He'd probably prefer a good steak.